The London Underground stopped at Oxford Circus. Amid the hurried voices and the metallic noise of the tracks, an inspector pointed at the folded prayer rug inside Mr. Hamid's backpack and said arrogantly, "This isn't the place for that. Get off." A dry laugh rippled through the carriage. The old man rose slowly, leaning on his cane. "Son, I'm just going to see my grandson." But the answer came as a shove. The doors slammed shut. Hamid stood on the platform under the cold fluorescent light, holding his tasbih between trembling fingers. He took a deep breath and whispered, "Hasbi Allahu wa ni'mal wakil." At that moment, the tunnel lights flickered and a strong gust swept across the tracks, as if the very air had heard the injustice, and what happened in the next few minutes would show that Allah defends those who endure in silence. Before continuing, make sure you're subscribed and tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. Mr. Hamid, of Pakistani origin, lived in Whitechapel, a modest neighborhood in East London where minarets blended with old brick facades. At 72, he lived alone in a small room above a Turkish bakery, surrounded by the constant smell of freshly baked bread. A retired tailor, he spent his days between the Quran, prayers, and the distant sound of trains. Every Friday he put on his brown vest, adjusted his white kufi, and slowly walked to the station. He carried a cloth bag with 3 things: dates, a small bottle of water, and his neatly folded prayer rug. The destination was always the same: his 7-year-old grandson Yusuf's house, where a cheerful voice would shout, "Dada's here!" That day the wind blew cold, but Hamid's heart was light. He had set aside a few sweets for Yusuf and kept repeating silently, "Alhamdulillah, another Friday to see his smile." As he crossed the busy streets of the British capital, he had no idea that on that ordinary April afternoon he would be tested before hundreds of eyes, and that his patience would become a living testimony of Allah's justice. The London Underground car was packed, a mix of languages, smells, and haste. Men in suits checked their watches, tourists laughed loudly, and the metallic clatter of the wheels seemed to mark the city's chaotic rhythm. In the corner, Mr. Hamid kept his eyes lowered, slowly rolling the tasbih between his fingers. Each bead was a memory, a subhanallah that kept his heart steady amid the indifference around him. A young man in a dark suit, with earphones hanging around his neck, began watching him impatiently. His expression was a mix of disdain and irritation. "Cut it out, old man, you're bothering people." Hamid looked up, his face calm. "Son, it's only remembrance of Allah." The young man laughed sarcastically. "Then remember him outside the train." Some passengers laughed, others pretended not to see. The old man tried to return to his recitation, but the young man stood up, walked to the door, and called an inspector waiting at the next stop. Seconds later, the doors opened with a harsh sound. 2 uniformed officers stepped in, their gaze cold and hurried. "Sir, we've received a complaint. You're disturbing the passengers." Hamid blinked, confused. "Disturbing? I'm only praying silently. Please step off the train." His trembling hands searched for balance on his cane. "But I haven't done anything." Before he could finish, one of the officers pushed him firmly. Hamid's frail body wavered, almost falling. Laughter spread. A group of young people lifted their phones, recording the scene. "Look, it's Grandpa the Radical," someone mocked. Hamid straightened his hat, took a deep breath, and answered only with a look, the kind that doesn't accuse, only grieves. As the doors closed behind him, one of the phones captured something no one noticed at the time. The light in the carriage flickered at the exact moment he uttered Allah's name. Outside, the train pulled away, leaving the echo of steel through the platform. The old man remained still, the tasbih firm in his hands. And without the passengers realizing it, the station's security camera recorded a subtle glow moving along the floor, a light that seemed to follow Hamid's steps. It was the beginning of something no one in the underground would ever forget. Oxford Circus station sank into an eerie silence. The next train hadn't arrived yet, and the sound of the inspector's boots echoed on the damp floor. Old Hamid stood against the wall, breathing with difficulty. The cold pierced his coat, but he didn't complain. He simply watched the electronic display above the tracks, where the minutes began to flash out of order. 4:12, 9:58, 00, as if time itself had gone astray. A cold wind swept through the tunnel, stronger than usual. Papers scattered on the ground swirled in circles, and a metallic hum echoed through the columns like distant thunder. Suddenly, the prayer rug he had carefully stored inside his bag slipped out and unfolded on its own before him, the fabric spreading perfectly across the platform floor. Hamid froze. A deep, unexplainable feeling filled his chest. The air seemed to vibrate. Before he could bend down to pick up the rug, something even more extraordinary happened. A white dove, from who knows where, descended and landed right in the center of the rug, its gaze fixed on the old man, as if it recognized him. The inspectors watching from a distance exchanged uneasy glances. "Where did that bird come from? We're underground," one muttered. The other tried to contact control over the radio. No sound, only static. Within seconds, the station lights began to flicker, one then another, until the entire corridor glowed with alternating shades of blue and white. The panels shut down, the turnstiles froze, and the incoming train screeched to a halt before entering the platform. For a brief moment, it was as if all of London held its breath. Hamid looked at the rug spread before him and said calmly, "Allah knows what the heart carries, even when the world does not understand." The dove flapped its wings slowly, taking flight toward the dark tunnel just as the power suddenly returned. The display resumed the correct time, 6:47 p.m. The inspectors stepped back, confused, unable to explain what had just happened. But one of the security cameras had recorded every second, including the subtle glow that seemed to surround the old man, a golden reflection impossible to have come from those cold lights. Nothing else was said, but everyone who was there felt it. Something beyond human logic had passed through that station. When the power was restored, the atmosphere in the station was no longer the same. The two officers who had forced the old man off the train were pale, exchanging uneasy looks. One muttered, "Did you see what I saw? The clock stopped, even the radio went dead." The other replied nervously, "And that light, it didn't come from the lamps." In the control room, the Transport for London technicians began reviewing the camera footage. The images showed the exact moment Mr. Hamid was pushed off the train. Right after, the video captured something no one could explain, a golden aura radiating around his body, pulsing for 3 seconds before fading away like mist. The supervisor, an experienced man, stood up from his chair and moved closer to the screen. "Pause it, zoom in." The operator obeyed. There he was, the old man with the tasbih in his hands, his face serene, and a soft light reflecting off the metallic walls of the train. "Is that a camera glitch?" one technician asked. "No," replied the supervisor. "All the other cameras are fine. The phenomenon happened only at this spot." While they tried to make sense of it, on the other side of the station, Mr. Hamid quietly picked up his prayer rug. There was no anger in his eyes, only compassion. With his age-bent frame, he whispered softly, "O Lord, forgive those who act in ignorance. Guide their hearts toward understanding." Without drawing attention, he left the platform, walking slowly up the escalator that still trembled from the power outage. The officers watched him from afar, unable to approach. The younger one, visibly shaken, murmured, "He should be furious, yet he prayed for us." Minutes later, the young control room employee, a British man of Indian descent named Adam, took his phone and discreetly followed the old man outside. He wanted to see who this man was, the one who answered humiliation with mercy. Hamid walked silently along the damp sidewalk, his grey coat blending into the London night fog. Before crossing the street, he stopped before a shop window and pulled a piece of bread from his bag. He broke it in half and offered it to a homeless man sleeping beneath the bus stop shelter. Adam stood still, watching from a distance. Everything about him seemed simple, his gesture, his gaze, his faith. But there was something the young man couldn't explain. Every time Hamid passed under a streetlight, the light flickered gently, as if acknowledging his presence. Back at the control center, reports showed that no other section of the underground had experienced any malfunction at that time, only the platform where the old man had stood. And the video, now widely discussed among the technicians, showed something impossible to ignore. At the moment Hamid made his supplication, the golden light took shape, resembling the silhouette of 2 wings spreading behind him. No one dared to say it aloud, but everyone there knew it wasn't a malfunction. It was a sign. The next morning, London's subway routine seemed back to normal, but inside the monitoring rooms nothing felt ordinary. Recordings of the incident had spread among the staff like fire through dry paper. 3 different cameras showed the same phenomenon, a golden light outlining the body of an old man unjustly expelled. The image didn't blink, didn't shake, didn't reflect. It was constant, steady, impossible to be a technical error. A maintenance engineer tried to explain, unfolding diagrams and reports. Maybe magnetic interference from the power lines, but another interrupted him. Impossible. That would have affected the entire system, not just that spot. The silence that followed was heavy. Someone murmured, "Then, what was it?" A few hours later, the Evening Standard quietly published a small note in the corner of a page. Mysterious interference halts underground for 3 minutes. Experts investigate unknown cause. No name was mentioned, but the staff knew exactly who it was about. Within seconds, the station lights began to flicker, one, then another, until the entire corridor glowed with alternating shades of blue and white. The panels shut down, the turnstiles froze, and the incoming train screeched to a halt before entering the platform. For a brief moment, it was as if all of London held its breath. Hamid looked at the rug spread before him and said calmly, "Allah knows what the heart carries, even when the world does not understand." The dove flapped its wings slowly, taking flight toward the dark tunnel just as the power suddenly returned. The display resumed the correct time, 6:47 p.m. The inspectors stepped back, confused, unable to explain what had just happened. But one of the security cameras had recorded every second, including the subtle glow that seemed to surround the old man, a golden reflection impossible to have come from those cold lights. Nothing else was said, but everyone who was there felt it. Something beyond human logic had passed through that station. When the power was restored, the atmosphere in the station was no longer the same. The two officers who had forced the old man off the train were pale, exchanging uneasy looks. One muttered, "Did you see what I saw? The clock stopped. Even the radio went dead." The other replied nervously, "And that light, it didn't come from the lamps." In the control room, the Transport for London technicians began reviewing the camera footage. The images showed the exact moment Mr. Hamid was pushed off the train. Right after, the video captured something no one could explain, a golden aura radiating around his body, pulsing for 3 seconds before fading away like mist. The supervisor, an experienced man, stood up from his chair and moved closer to the screen. "Pause it. Zoom in." The operator obeyed. There he was, the old man with the tasbih in his hands, his face serene, and a soft light reflecting off the metallic walls of the train. "Is that a camera glitch?" one technician asked. "No," replied the supervisor. "All the other cameras are fine. The phenomenon happened only at this spot." While they tried to make sense of it, on the other side of the station, Mr. Hamid quietly picked up his prayer rug. There was no anger in his eyes, only compassion. With his age-bent frame, he whispered softly, "O Lord, forgive those who act in ignorance. Guide their hearts toward understanding." Without drawing attention, he left the platform, walking slowly up the escalator that still trembled from the power outage. The officers watched him from afar, unable to approach. The younger one, visibly shaken, murmured, "He should be furious, yet he prayed for us." Minutes later, the young control room employee, a British man of Indian descent named Adam, took his phone and discreetly followed the old man outside. He wanted to see who this man was, the one who answered humiliation with mercy. Hamid walked silently along the damp sidewalk, his grey coat blending into the London night fog. Before crossing the street, he stopped before a shop window and pulled a piece of bread from his bag. He broke it in half and offered it to a homeless man sleeping beneath the bus stop shelter. Adam stood still, watching from a distance. Everything about him seemed simple, his gesture, his gaze, his faith. But there was something the young man couldn't explain. Every time Hamid passed under a streetlight, the light flickered gently, as if acknowledging his presence. Back at the control center, reports showed that no other section of the underground had experienced any malfunction at that time, only the platform where the old man had stood. And the video, now widely discussed among the technicians, showed something impossible to ignore. At the moment Hamid made his supplication, the golden light took shape, resembling the silhouette of 2 wings spreading behind him. No one dared to say it aloud, but everyone there knew it wasn't a malfunction. It was a sign. The next morning, London's subway routine seemed back to normal, but inside the monitoring rooms nothing felt ordinary. Recordings of the incident had spread among the staff like fire through dry paper. 3 different cameras showed the same phenomenon, a golden light outlining the body of an old man unjustly expelled. The image didn't blink, didn't shake, didn't reflect. It was constant, steady, impossible to be a technical error. A maintenance engineer tried to explain, unfolding diagrams and reports. Maybe magnetic interference from the power lines, but another interrupted him. Impossible. That would have affected the entire system, not just that spot. The silence that followed was heavy. Someone murmured, "Then, what was it?" A few hours later, the Evening Standard quietly published a small note in the corner of a page. Mysterious interference halts underground for 3 minutes. Experts investigate unknown cause. No name was mentioned, but the staff knew exactly who it was about. The young man Adam, the operator who had followed Hamid the night before, couldn't get the scene out of his mind. The flickering lights, the dove on the prayer rug, the old man's calm while everyone else lost control. He needed to understand. The next afternoon he went to Whitechapel, the neighborhood where the old man lived. He asked at the bakery, and the baker pointed toward the corner. Over there, near the mosque. He's always feeding the school kids. Adam walked that way, and there he was, sitting on a wooden bench wearing the same grey coat, the tasbih between his fingers. Around him 4 children in colorful uniforms laughed, eating dates the old man handed out from a small bowl. The air felt lighter on that little stretch of street. When the children ran home, Adam approached. "Mr. Hamid?" The old man looked up and smiled. "Yes, son. I work for the underground, and I saw what happened yesterday. The blackout, the light, the miracle, what was that?" Hamid looked at the young man calmly. "Miracle," he repeated with a soft laugh. "Nothing new, son. When you carry peace inside, the whole world has to stop and listen." Adam was speechless. There was truth and lightness in that sentence. The man before him didn't seem extraordinary, and maybe that was exactly what made him so different. Hamid continued, gazing up at the cloudy sky. "People fear what they don't understand. When they pushed me, I didn't see enemies, only tired hearts. Their anger was heavier than my age." He paused, then added gently, "But Allah hears even the silence of the wronged." The young man sat beside him. "You weren't angry?" Hamid shook his head. "Anger is like fire in the desert. It burns whoever tries to hold it. I only made dua. The rest belongs to him." The muezzin called for Asr prayer. Hamid rose slowly, leaning on his cane, and looked at Adam kindly. "Come pray with us someday. Not to understand what you saw, but to feel what the world has forgotten." As the old man walked toward the mosque, a light breeze swept through the street. Adam looked down and saw something that hadn't been there before, a white feather lying at his feet. He picked it up, surprised, and realized that for some reason the wind had completely stopped. In that moment, Adam understood that what had happened in the underground wasn't about light or technology. It was about presence. Something unseen had stopped the city to defend a man who chose patience over fury, and that feather, soft and silent, seemed to confirm it. Allah truly speaks, even when the world does not listen. 3 days had passed since the incident. The story of the inexplicable blackout in the London Underground was already circulating among employees, and the image of the old man bathed in light had become a source of whispers and uneasy silence in the station's halls. The administration had launched an internal investigation, and as an immediate measure, the inspector responsible for the expulsion was suspended. His name was Richard Hale, a 40-year-old man known for his rigidity and difficult temper. On that grey Thursday morning, he left the company building with his uniform folded under his arm and a knot in his stomach. The newspapers spoke of an unusual technical failure, but in Richard's conscience, there was only shame. As he walked down the busy streets of Whitechapel, he saw from a distance a familiar figure, an old man with a white beard, a slow gait, and a cane. The same man he had humiliated before dozens of passengers. His first instinct was to turn the corner and pretend he hadn't seen him. But something, maybe guilt, maybe curiosity, made him stop. Hamid noticed him first. He stopped too, leaning on his cane, and smiled. He raised his hand in a gesture of peace. "Assalamu alaikum, son." The greeting fell upon Richard like a weight, and at the same time a relief. He took a deep breath and crossed the street. "Sir, His voice faltered. "I lost control. That day, I was angry, rushed, tired. I shouldn't have done that. Please forgive me." Hamid looked at him with disarming tenderness. No judgment, no trace of pride, only compassion. "Allah forgives those who repent, son. Do the same for others, and your soul will find rest." The inspector swallowed hard. He had expected reproach, perhaps indifference, but received kindness instead. "Why weren't you angry? I humiliated you. You could have reported me." Hamid replied, watching the flow of the street. "Anger heals no wound. I trust Allah's justice, not man's. What I lost in that train, he returned in peace." For a few seconds, the city's noise seemed to fade away. Richard felt something inside him he couldn't name, as if the air itself had changed weight. The old man, sensing the silence, placed a hand on his shoulder. When someone hurts you, it's because they carry pain, and when you forgive, you break that chain of pain. A group of young Muslims passed by, greeting Hamid respectfully. Richard watched, surprised by their natural reverence. That man, the one he had treated as a nuisance, was clearly loved there. Hamid then took a small date from his bag and offered it. "Take it, son. It's sweet, even though it comes from a barren land." Richard hesitated but accepted it. The taste was simple and somehow restorative. As he chewed, a tear rolled down his face, though he didn't understand why. "Mr. Hamid," he murmured, "what happened in that subway? The light, the blackout, was that you?" The old man smiled. "Nothing comes from me, I'm only a servant. Sometimes Allah shows his strength to teach gentleness." A soft wind blew, moving the scarf around Hamid's neck. Richard stood still, watching the man disappear among the pedestrians, walking with the same calm steps of someone who owes nothing to anyone. That night, when he arrived home, the former inspector opened his laptop and searched for the meaning of a word that wouldn't leave his mind. Sabr. He read, patience in the face of injustice, perseverance in times of trial, trust in the decree of Allah. He closed his eyes and understood. The true test hadn't happened in the subway, but now had in that unexpected encounter, and by choosing to ask for forgiveness, he felt something he had never known before: peace. The week passed in silence, but on Friday, Jumu'ah, something began to move again, not underground but in the heavens. The London sun shone timidly as the Whitechapel Road Mosque began to fill. Men in suits, young students, elders with their walking sticks. Among them Hamid seated near the front row, the tasbih between his fingers, his eyes glistening. He seemed at peace, as if he already knew the true judgment had passed. When the Imam climbed the minbar and began the khutbah, the atmosphere shifted. His words spoke of patience in the face of injustice and how Allah elevates the humble before the proud. With every verse of the Quran recited, Hamid's heart beat with serenity. Outside, standing on the sidewalk, Richard watched from a distance. In his hands was the badge he still hadn't returned to work, and on his face, a mixture of remorse and searching. He didn't have the courage to enter, yet something kept him there, unmoving. When the Imam made the final dua, the air seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly, a powerful gust swept through the mosque, gently lifting the carpets and making the curtains tremble as if a train were passing inside. No one moved. The sound didn't come from the street. It came from within. At the same time, across the Central Line's digital clocks, a phenomenon occurred. They all stopped exactly at 1:47 p.m., the same time as the blackout that had surrounded Hamid days earlier. The panels restarted on their own, and technicians, confused, logged the event as an anomaly with no apparent cause. Inside the mosque, the natural light streaming through the stained glass shifted in tone. A golden hue spread like an eternal sunset, bathing the faces of the worshippers. Some men wept without knowing why. Others, silently, raised their hands to the sky. The Imam paused his prayer, looking around, and saw Hamid completely still, his face serene, eyes closed, a single tear rolling down his cheek. He seemed to be speaking with someone no one else could see. Outside, Richard watched from afar when the same wind brushed over him. The badge he held slipped from his hands and landed at the feet of a young boy leaving the mosque. The boy picked it up, looked at the name and smiled. "You're the man from the subway, aren't you? My grandfather prayed for you." Richard swallowed hard. "Your grandfather is Mr. Hamid?" The boy nodded, pointing inside. And in that instant, the former inspector could no longer hold himself together. He fell to his knees on the rain-soaked sidewalk and with a trembling voice spoke the words the world had been waiting to hear. "Allah, guide me as you guided that man." The wind ceased suddenly. The mosque sank into a deep silence, the kind that precedes something sacred. A beam of sunlight broke through the clouds and illuminated the entrance, exactly where Richard wept. Inside and outside, everyone felt the same shiver, an invisible reminder that Allah answers even the prayers spoken through tears. And so, in that moment when time stopped for the second time, heaven witnessed a new miracle, not of light, but of transformation. Within days, the story spread through the corridors of the underground and across the city. In employee group chats, the video of the blackout circulated again, now with different comments. Some mocked, "The mystical grandpa of the subway strikes again," but many others remained silent for long minutes, reflecting. A supervisor wrote anonymously on the company forum, "Maybe it wasn't a technical failure, Maybe it was a reminder. The changes began quietly. Employees who once ignored passengers wearing turbans or veils began greeting them with respect. One even asked a Muslim co-worker, "Can you teach me how to say Assalamu alaikum properly?" It was a simple gesture, but it was born from something real, collective repentance. Former Inspector Richard Hale, who had resigned shortly after his conversation with Hamid, surprised everyone by requesting a transfer to the Community Safety Department. When asked why, he replied, "I want to learn to protect, not to harm." Since then, he began attending lectures on diversity and interfaith coexistence, always carrying a dried date in his pocket, a reminder of a meeting that changed his life. Meanwhile, Hamid continued his routine unchanged. He woke before dawn, performed his prayers, bought fresh bread from the bakery, and visited his grandson Yusuf after Maghrib. He always carried the same gentle smile and the same worn prayer rug, folded carefully. But something had changed, not within him, but around him. Wherever he went, eyes recognized him. Bus drivers greeted him, shopkeepers offered him tea, children asked for his blessing. One morning a student approached at the station and asked, "Are you the man of light?" Hamid laughed, shaking his head. "No, son, the light wasn't mine. It was the reflection of patience." And those words began to spread, phrases written on murals, shared across social media, recited in sermons. The light wasn't his. It was the reflection of patience. Even without seeking fame, the old man had become a symbol of something greater than the miracle itself, the silent dignity of those who endure injustice without hatred. And while many still debated what had really happened in that subway, those who knew him understood the truth. The true sign hadn't come from the sky, but from a heart that chose saber when the world expected anger. Weeks turned into months, and the old tailor's life went on with the same simplicity as always, but now the world around him felt lighter. Gradually, invitations began to arrive from schools, Islamic centers, and even local churches. Everyone wanted to hear from the man of the station. Hamid agreed, but with one condition. "Call me only Brother Hamid. I'm just one servant among many." During his talks, he didn't speak of miracles or place himself at the center of the story. In a calm voice, he shared what pain had taught him. Those who endure humiliation with faith are elevated by Allah without ever needing to raise their voice. The audience, often composed of people from different religions, would sit in silence, not because of eloquence, but because of the truth that radiated from that man's serenity. Among the listeners were young people who had once mocked religion. Now they sought him out for advice on patience, discipline, and forgiveness. Some even joined him on his morning walks, helping carry the bag of dates he handed out to strangers, as if sowing invisible blessings. In an unexpected gesture, Transport for London, the company responsible for the Underground, decided to honor him quietly. At the station where the incident had occurred, they installed a small wooden bench with a golden plaque. It read, "Dedicated to those who remain patient under trial." Passengers often stopped to read it. Some took pictures, others simply closed their eyes for a moment. Few knew the full story, but everyone felt that the bench carried something sacred, an echo of dignity. Curiously, from that day on, no major delays were ever recorded on that line. The engineers called it coincidence. The train conductors, with a tone of respect, called it baraka, blessing. Once, a journalist asked Hamid if he believed the event had changed London. He smiled, with eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. "No, son, London is far too big to change because of one man, but maybe one heart at a time." And so the old man continued living as always, simple, kind, invisible to hurried eyes, but remembered by heaven, because even in a city where noise never ceases, there was now a place of permanent silence, a bench where patience had turned into light. That winter morning, the bakery's routine felt incomplete. The baker noticed the silence upstairs. No slow footsteps, no gentle "Assalamu alaikum" as on other days. He called for Hamid, but there was no response. He climbed the stairs slowly and found the door slightly open. Inside, the old man was kneeling on his prayer rug in sujud, his body still, his face peaceful, his soul already surrendered. He had departed as he lived, in worship. Morning light entered through the window, touching the serene face of the man who had once been humiliated and turned shame into spiritual victory. The distant sound of the train echoed faintly, rhythmic, as if the Underground itself were paying tribute to the passenger who had taught an entire city about Sabre. At the funeral, the mosque was full, Men and women of different backgrounds came to pay their respects. Muslims, Christians, Hindus, even tourists who had heard about the man from the subway. Among them, Richard, now wearing a short beard and a white kufi, couldn't hold back his tears. He stood beside little Yusuf, who gripped his grandfather's tasbih tightly. With a trembling voice, Richard said, "He taught me what true patience is. I used to think faith was only about praying. Now I know it's about enduring without hatred." Yusuf looked at him and replied with the same serenity he had inherited. "My grandfather used to say, those who are humiliated on earth are honored in heaven." Silence filled the courtyard. Even the wind seemed to honor that moment. When Hamid's body was placed into the ground, a white dove, the same one many swore they had seen at the station, landed upon the fresh grave. No one dared to chase it away. And as the call of the Adhan echoed through London's grey streets, one certainty filled every heart present. Allah never abandons those who remember him in their pain. Years passed, and Oxford Circus station remained as busy as ever, full of haste, footsteps, and announcements echoing through the loudspeakers. But among the countless details the crowd hardly notices, one remains. On the bench closest to the doors, discreetly fixed, a small golden plaque gleams with the inscription, "Here, a man was expelled, and Allah defended him." Every day, dozens of people stop before it, read the phrase, and for a brief moment, the noise of the subway seems to fade away. Some simply lower their eyes, others whisper, "Subhanallah," and some close their hands, as if something unseen had just brushed their souls. Security cameras have recorded a phenomenon that no one has ever managed to explain. On random days, almost always at 5:42 p.m., the exact time of the incident, a soft breeze moves through the platform. Even when the doors are shut and the air stands still, the wind passes among people, light, fragrant, like the scent of freshly picked dates. The staff call this moment the Eid wind. No technical manual can explain it, yet everyone feels the same effect. A brief inner silence, a calm that doesn't come from the outside world. It is as if the place itself remembers what many have forgotten, that patience is a form of worship, and that the heart which endures injustice with faith stands closest to divine mercy. Children who grew up hearing the story ask their mothers, "Mum, was it Allah who blew the wind?" And the mothers, smiling, reply, "It was Allah reminding us that He never sleeps." Today, that simple name, Hamid, appears in no monument and in no history book, but his memory lives where the miracle isn't the shine of light, but the strength of forgiveness. Because faith is not proven on peaceful days. It reveals itself when the world pushes you down, and you choose to stand, trusting that Allah sees what human eyes ignore. And if this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and stay with us. In the next video, you will hear another testimony confirming Allah's power to defend those who remain steadfast in faith.